Well, hey there, are you just getting interested in Pathfinder 2? Are you overwhelmed by the fact that there's 22 different classes to choose from and counting? However, would you decide on what class to choose for your idealistic character that you're trying to craft? Worry not, friend, because I have done you a favor, and I have created a video for you that goes over every single class with a brief summary to tell you exactly what they're about and why you might want to choose them. You're very welcome. I accept tribute in the form of money, cash, and pictures of my OC. Anyway, I've kind of divvied up all the classes into a bunch of different smaller categories so that way they're kind of easier to understand. These categories are in no way official, and you probably won't find other people using the same terminology, but they might make it easier for you to understand them. Combatants are a group of martial characters that are a bit more no-nonsense in how they approach combat. Barbarians are for when you want to hit hard and be all in on muscle. A lot of people say that Dragon Ball Z characters might fit better as monks, but in my opinion, barbarians have more of that flavor, getting stronger when they're desperate or angry. Your instinct alters your rage, and can even let you specialize in things like oversized weapons, give you draconic or animalistic traits, or even channel ancestral spirits to aid you in the middle of battle. Fighters are the de facto fighters. Go figure. You want to focus on weapon use and combat maneuvers? Try a fighter. They're pretty easy to pick up and are really impactful and fun. They don't have a subclass, but instead have a lot of highly modular feats that let you alter how you approach combat, and let you customize your playstyle to whatever suits you. Rangers eat good in Pathfinder 2. While they're still fighter-like with a bit of a nature theme, the modularity of the system makes it really easy to customize what kind of ranger you want to make. You want to use magic, animal companions, focus on nature and survival? You can pick and choose which elements suit your idea of the ranger. And whatever options you go with, your ranger will feel like they have a unique and specific identity. And with Hunt Prey, they become one of the best single-target attackers in the game. And don't be fooled, the name Ranger refers to being like a warden of the forest. It doesn't actually mean you have to use ranged weapons, and in fact in Pathfinder 2, Rangers are effective with all types of weapons, even two-handed and strength-based ones. Pathfinder 2 probably does Rangers the best out of any system that I've played. Also, in my opinion, it's probably one of the most effective systems to make Aragorn in. Champions are what I like to call the team dad. They tend to be very heavily armored, big boy tanks. This also includes the Paladin, which you might be more familiar with. Champions get a bit of divine influence and a few focus spells as well, depending on what kind of god that they choose, or what cause they align themselves with, but otherwise they're totally martial. Your cause determines your playstyle and is influenced a lot by your alignment, if you're using alignment that is, and grants you a unique reaction known as your Divine Smite, which you can use to punish enemies when they try to hurt your party members. You also get a unique spiritual ally in the form of a weapon, shield, or mount. Strikers are also another group of damage dealers that are really capable at what they do. However, they're a lot more focused on mobility, and when they do fight, at least in my own opinion, they tend to have a little bit more style about it. Monks are for when you really want to play Bruce Lee in the middle of Golarion. Uniquely in Pathfinder 2, monks are actually pretty durable, and are also still highly mobile and have very good action economy thanks to Flurry of Blows. Like fighters, they don't actually have a true subclass and instead are customized based on what kind of stances you choose, which grant you unique unarmed strikes. And these can be a lot of different things, from strength-based kicks, to ranged attacks, to stances that actually turn you into a tank. The stances are so enticing that they literally made an entire archetype so that way other classes could easily pick them up. Swashbucklers, meanwhile, combine the combat focus of the fighter with the more slipperiness and charm of the rogue. The Swashbuckler specializes in doing combat maneuvers to fake out their opponents, which then grants them bonuses to their damage, as well as a finishing blow that they can execute. If it is not enough for you to just fight, you need to do it with style, then check out a Swashbuckler. Look, you probably saw Gunslinger and immediately thought, oh hey, guns, so I probably don't need to tell you why you might want to play one. That said, Gunslingers are not the only class that is capable of using firearms, though they do get access to some unique options for reloading, as well as maneuvers and stuff that can further enhance their flexibility on the battlefield. Gunslingers go all in on the gritty style of fighting. If you want to be a cowboy in a fantasy world, go Gunslinger. Specialists is a group that I kind of created to describe characters that are more focused on utility and skill use, even though they can do a respectable damage on their own. Alchemists embody the mad scientist archetype. They sort of operate like item-based casters, which can make them a little bit hard to understand, but are amazing supports in the right hands. Especially since you can just give your allies your items and stuff and let them spend their actions to use them instead of your own. Your research field allows you to specialize more into bombs, elixirs and healing, mutagens to modify you or your allies, or poisons to debilitate your enemies. Investigators are for when you want to play the big brain boy but don't want to be a caster. Investigators are tied with rogues and skill focus, and they're so smart that they get a special action that allows them to use their intelligence to make weapon attacks. This also premeditates your next attack roll, which means that you get to see the result of the die before you commit to the attack. This allows them to be super optimized with their actions, deciding when to attack when it's opportunistic, and doing other things when it's not. If you saw Sherlock and thought it was so cool how he slowed down time and thought about all these different maneuvers that he could do to take down the opponent to identify the weak point, yeah, that is literally how the Investigator is built, and what it's meant to embody. Rogues, meanwhile, are the ultimate skill monkeys, just like they were in Pathfinder 1. While you can absolutely play the traditional sneaky, stabby, dexy thief type, rogues have several rackets that allow them to lean into literally any ability score and make a bunch of different ideas. Ruffians, for instance, are armored sneak attackers who wear medium armor and can use any simple weapon and focus on strength rather than dexterity. Scoundrels are more charismatic and can gain benefits to feint and charisma-based skills. And Eldritch Tricksters, also known as Arcane Tricksters, can take a multi-class dedication with any caster for free and lean into the magic side of combining magic and sneak attacks. Inventors are another option for people who want to play a smart character that isn't a caster. Like the Alchemist, they also turn crafting into a combat skill, but unlike the Alchemist, who specializes in instantaneous and consumable items like bombs and elixirs, they instead focus on a singular item, their innovation. You can choose to specialize in a custom modular weapon, a set of power armor, or a mechanical construct that operates like a pet, and apply modifications to each one to customize how they work and what they can do. You can also explode, voluntarily. Spontaneous casters are casters that can only cast spells that they know, which makes them a bit easier to learn at the expense of a bit of flexibility. They tend to have more spell slots than prepared casters, and because they don't need to prepare spells, they have a little bit more flexibility in how they use said slots, even if they don't have as big of a repertoire. Bards are very much jacks of all trades, who specialize highly in using performance and figuring out how to use it in combat and in other situations. They also get some unique abilities that make them really good at buffing up their allies, such as Inspire Courage, which gives a +1 to attack rolls, which, if you know how the system in Pathfinder 2 works, is super important, because that's also an increased chance to crit. The muse they select gives them a few assorted perks, such as martial training, or things like unique cantrips, or even additional spells. If you want to play a more support-focused, charismatic caster character, they're probably the one that you want to look at. Sorcerers are the original charisma-based caster. Fun fact, in older editions of the game, sorcerers and wizards actually were identical, the only thing that changed was how they cast their spells. However, now in Pathfinder, sorcerer magic comes from their bloodline, which gives them some unique side effects when using certain spells as well as determines which of the 4 spell traditions they use. Some bloodlines that a sorcerer can call upon are things such as Aberrant, Angelic, Demonic, Diabolic, Draconic, Elemental, Fey, Genie, Hag, Imperial, Nymph, Phoenix, Psychochomp, Shadow, Undead, and Wormblessed, which is basically Dragon but Divine. They're pretty accessible to pick up for a spellcaster, and their spell-like abilities give them some pretty unique flavoring. Psychics are a bit more complicated than the other spontaneous casters. They're occult casters like bards but have fewer spell slots, and go all in on focus points, but not focus spells. Psychics don't use focus points for unique spells, but rather can use them to amp up cantrips based on their subclass choices, gaining unique and potent effects that make their cantrips even stronger than their normal spell slots. Their other core mechanic is to unleash their psyche, which grants them other massive benefits for a short burst of time, then stupefying them for 2 rounds. And while unleashed, they have other special psyche actions that they can take that are exceptionally potent. Psychics can be intelligence or charisma based and make for excellent blasters or other support type characters. Plus also the flavor of them is incredibly cool. They can shirk some components of casting, such as vocal components, for mental ones instead. And they get unique modifications that they can do to their spells that make them more psychic-y themed. Oracles, meanwhile, are also divine casters, but they have less of an interaction with any of the deities in the game. Oracles are similar to clerics in the fact that they have divine spells, but they are actually spontaneous casters. And while they have a domain like a cleric, they don't usually have a deity that they worship, or need to worship in order to get their abilities. Their power instead comes from some esoteric, hard-to-understand curse. This gives them several drawbacks, but they can also spread these drawbacks to opponents, and even turn some of their own drawbacks into a source of power. Oracles, in all honesty, can be a bit difficult to play, but they are so interesting that you might want to give it a shot. Mages is a group of prepared casters that I kind of lumped together because I didn't really have anywhere else to put them. As prepared casters, they know a whole lot of spells but can only pick through a few at a time. This makes them very flexible, able to adapt to the situation day to day. Clerics were the original divine casters, and are still amazing at it. Depending on what domain you specialize in, you can technically make any kind of cleric you want, from a martial character to a divine caster to a support unit, whatever. They also get several bonus spell slots per day that they can use for heal or harm depending on what kind of god they worship. And new to Pathfinder 2, you can specialize as a cloistered cleric, which is more of like a cloth-based spellcaster, or go war priest and give them a more traditional armored cleric type of feel that specializes in their deity's weapon. Druids are for when you want to make a character that is all about nature. They're a tree-loving hippie, they just love plants, they live among nature, and they talk to animals. I'm pretty sure everybody knows the type. However, in Pathfinder 2, Druids are probably one of the most flexible classes in the game. The modularity of the system lets you pick and choose which traditional themes that you might like to lean into, as well as gaining you an additional focus on one of your choosing. You can specialize in animal companions, familiar use, environment-derived spells, and wild shape, among other things. If you love animals or are simply enticed by commanding and summoning the elements, Druid is definitely for you. Wizards, meanwhile, are the de facto arcane caster, and are the original prepared caster. For a lot of people, they tend to be a little bit too vanilla, but don't be fooled. Wizards focus on modifying and augmenting their spellcasting abilities, and getting assistance with that through their tools that they create. Your thesis in magic school allow you to kind of make your own custom little subclass. Your thesis in particular gives you some kind of unique utility, such as the ability to modify your spell slots or combine them, you can gain a familiar, or you can even get started with staff crafting at an earlier level. Witches, on the other hand, are often seen as kind of a sister class to a wizard, both being intelligence-based and prepared casters. However, uniquely, they can choose from any spell list, rather than just being limited to arcane. Thematically, they also have a patron, which is the source of their power, which also grants them an enhanced familiar, as well as access to hexes and curses which they can put on their opponents. This might feel a little similar to the Warlock of 5e. The familiar is super important to the class, and is the source of their spellcrafting, so if you want to play a caster that goes all in on the familiar, the Witch is definitely for you. Advanced classes have a bit more unique or esoteric mechanics and themes that don't really fit wholly into the other groups. I actually debated putting Alchemist in this list originally. If you can't decide between might or magic, the Magus might be for you, considering that they're a 50-50 mix of martial ability and spellcasting. Magi are what I like to call limited spellcasters, meaning they only get access to spell slots of their 2 highest levels. They still are technically prepared casters, which still gives them some form of utility. Their core mechanic involves combining spell attacks and weapon attacks simultaneously, imbuing spells into their weapon and unleashing both to a very potent effect. Summoners are another limited spellcaster, one that revolves entirely around a custom pet known as an Eidolon. Eidolon? I don't know. Their summon is linked to them and operates as a proxy fighter, making them a strong force on the battlefield, especially for positioning. And, thanks to the 3-action system, companion controls feels less overwhelming and more fluid than ever before. If you want to go all in on a pet class, the Summoner is definitely for you. Thaumaturge, meanwhile, is a martial type class that can fool people into thinking that they're a wizard or something. They carry a bunch of implements and knickknacks that, to the untrained eye, may seem useless or junky, but in reality can be used to gain specific benefits and even exploit the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of any opponent. Yes, even those that don't have a weakness, they will create one. Thaumaturges are the ultimate monster hunters, and if you want to play a character like Geralt of Rivia or Trevor Belmont, check this class out because it's incredibly cool. So obviously I couldn't go into all the details on every class, but each one honestly has some interesting mechanics and themes going for it. And this is just my opinion, but each class really feels like it has a strong identity and unique mechanics that don't infringe upon one another. With that all said, what are your favorite classes, or which ones interest you the most? Anyway, be sure to show if you like the vid, and subscribe if you, Actually, to be honest, I kind of just upload whatever I want and whenever I want, so, there may or may not be more Pathfinder vids in the future. Can't promise anything. Do what you want. Okay, bye.